Okay, well, welcome everyone to today's session. We are doing a session today on Copilot Studio, and Joe Alexander is our presenter today, and he will be taking us through a crawl, walk, run approach and utilizing Copilot Studio as a way to simplify your adoption of artificial intelligence. We do aim to provide an event today that respects all individuals. So we ask that everyone assist in providing a welcoming and safe environment for everyone. We do bring 3 of these events to our customers each month. Thursdays, 2 p.m. Central or Eastern. And so if you have a topic that you would like us to present on in the future, go ahead and drop that in the chat today, and we will take consideration of that going forward in our schedule. We do have the lines muted to avoid any distractions or background noise today. And we will answer questions via the chat. So go ahead and put your questions there. And we've got folks monitoring those, and we'll be getting answers to you. And at the end, if we have some time available, we will unmute the lines to take some live questions as well. And tomorrow you will receive an email from me, Deb Victor, with today's recording and the deck and resources that'll be presented today. If you don't wish to receive that email in the future, go ahead and reply back to me and I'll take you off that distribution going forward. So with that, I am going to now hand it over to Joe Alexander. Thank you, Joe, for bringing this great topic to us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Deb. And hey, everyone. Happy to be here with you all today on this beautiful Southern California morning. My name is Joe Alexander. I am a technical specialist here with Microsoft within the state and local government group. And I'm excited to be talking to you guys today about Copilot Studio. And Copilot Studio really, as it ties back to and ties into this concept of generative AI. Along with me today is Doug Bell. He'll also be answering a lot of your questions in chat and maybe throwing some kind of concepts into here as how he sees generative AI and Copilot Studio as well. And so we're looking forward to kind of take you through the session here today. Just as a set of an agenda as far as what we're going to be covering, this is kind of the breakdown. I want to do a little bit of level setting with everybody first. Okay. And you'll see why I want to do that momentarily, but we're going to talk a little bit about a look back at chatbot real quickly about the Microsoft Copilot ecosystem, define what Copilot Studio is versus Copilot, and then also then lead into kind of that Gen AI and Copilot Studio conversation, which ultimately will be resulting in a demo build for you guys today. I'll actually be building a Copilot Studio with Gen AI capabilities from scratch during our session here today. So that's kind of the topic of what we're going to be hitting today. And again, if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to throw them in the chat there. So why are there so many of you, at last count 184, on this call today? Well, it's not because chatbots are new. Okay, chatbots have been around for a while, right? But you'll kind of see from the image on the screen there is it used to be took a lot of work to cover a very small amount of topics. And through the evolution of kind of the chatbot concepts in general, and specifically now with the introduction of generative AI, it has changed that whole paradigm, right? And now we have the ability through Copilot Studio to flip that script and say, hey, with very little work, I can actually get a whole lot of stuff covered. And so that's why now Copilot Studio, Gen AI, these things are such a hot topic, because we've now kind of moved from the left to the right of this screen by leveraging generative AI. The exciting part of this too is that as an organization, Microsoft, we're on the leading edge of this, right? We're really focused on bringing conversational AI to all of our customers, right? And to the world, quite frankly. For those of you who have been on a Copilot Bing search lately, I mean, we'll talk about this in a little bit. It's going to be pervasive. And so it's real important that we make sure that we're on the leading edge of that conversational AI conversation. You can kind of see there from a report done by IDC in 2023. That's where we want to be, and we want to keep pushing the boundaries, pushing the envelopes on this stuff. Now let's talk a little bit about the tool used to do that. So when I say the word Copilot, there's 184, 96 now of you on this meeting. I might get 196 different ideas around what Copilot is. And not to muddy the waters at all, but there's very good reason for that, right? We've kind of branded everything Copilot. There's Copilot for M365, there's Copilot for Windows, there's Copilot for Power BI, there's Copilot everywhere. And so while we've kind of got this landscape and this ecosystem where we've created all of these Copilots, I like to try to organize this to specifically show you what we're going to be covering today. And I do that in this way. Think of it this way: at your very highest level, something that I just categorize as being Copilot, right? It's the Copilot button that many of you probably have on your desktop, where you can bring it up and just ask AI a question, right? It's kind of like going into ChatGPT and asking ChatGPT a question. It's not specific. It's using natural language. Just go out and search and provide you with content. The next level is something I call Copilot products. Now, these are products that we've made available throughout our ecosystem. The one I usually point out is GitHub, right? For all you developers out there who are using GitHub, we have a GitHub Copilot. I saw a demo of it last week. It was really cool, but it's specifically related to functions that go on within GitHub, right? Not a whole lot of configuration I want to make to that, to be completely honest, but it is a product that we've put out there. Okay? The next series of Copilots that I've kind of called M365, Dynamics Copilots, and the Power Platform Copilots fall kind of in a grouping together. And these are all configurable Copilots, right? These are all bots that have been created or can be custom created to meet a need. So many of you may be using M365 Copilot today. You know, things like, a PowerPoint. This is my favorite example: is taking a summary document from put it into PowerPoint and let PowerPoint create a presentation for you. That's M365 Copilot. The same with Dynamics Copilots and Power Platform Copilots, what we call low-code Copilots. And all those things are sitting on top and can be administered through Copilot Studio. Right. So as we get in today, what I'm going to be focusing on is in that lower right-hand corner of this screen, is focusing on how are we building and bringing low-code bots or Copilots to market very quickly using the Copilot Studio platform. Okay. So again, just a couple of definitions. What's a Copilot? Very simply, it's a bot. Okay. The reason why now Copilot is now important is because now we're leveraging intelligent AI to try and help us through this process, right? And so when we're building all these Copilots, it's foundationally set in this concept of intelligent AI and generative AI to help us through the process, right? It's an assistance tool. Okay. It's not going to do everything for us. That's why we didn't call it pilot, right? We call it Copilot. It's going to help us through the process. And now delineate that from Copilot Studio. Copilot Studio now is becoming the platform off of which that we are either managing these Copilots, the M365 Copilots, the Dynamics Copilots, or, as we're going to do today, where we're coming in and actually building our own through a low-code, no-code type of environment. Okay? So this is really going to be the focus of what we're looking at, is from a Copilot Studio perspective. And I think the goal here is really to focus on the fact that, hey, we want to create chat experiences that are intelligent, secure, automated, customizable, and collaborative, right? And you can kind of see a video that's going there on the right-hand side, just of a chat going on within an organization about, hey, prepping for a budget review number. I don't know if we have enough money for that. And so this person goes out and wants to ask a Copilot. So in the course of this conversation these two people are having, they're going to go out and they're going to ask Copilot Finance, which is a Copilot was built, do we have enough budget to make this purchase? And so rather than having to go somewhere and pull that information, what it's doing is it's simply going out through generative AI, finding that information and bring it back to you. So really powerful. And that's really what our goal is, to make these chat experiences intelligent, automated, and customizable. So how do we do that? So this is kind of the life cycle, I think, of Copilot Studio. Okay. And while a number of these things on this screen have been around for years, right? The ability to create specific topics in the lower right-hand corner, the ability to publish this to multiple channels, whether this goes on a website or in a Teams channel, whatever. The two that we're really going to focus on today are the left and right top. The idea of being able to integrate with generative AI services. And when we talk about this whole walk, crawl, or this crawl, walk, run mentality, is how do we start leveraging it when we don't know necessarily how to build a large LLM or a large language model, right? How do we do this? And so that's what we're going to walk you guys through today is how are we starting to use those Gen AI capabilities within the platform. So Copilot Studio has this concept from a design standpoint is these really kind of these four building blocks on the right-hand side, knowledge, actions, logic, and channels. We're going to focus on three of them today. The one we're not going to focus on is channels because that's simply, hey, where do you want it to reside? As I said, do you want this to be a bot that goes onto your website? Do you want it to reside within Teams? Where do you want to place that? There's lots of options for that. But we're going to focus on today is the knowledge, actions, and logic piece because these three are kind of what I would call the crawl, walk, run kind of a concept. So to start with knowledge, this is kind of the initial crawl. Now, this may be a 9-month-old. I just learned how to crawl. This may be an 18-month-old. I know how to walk now, but I'm a lot faster at crawling type of a concept. Meaning that some of you may get into this and say, hey, at a very low level, I just want to know how to maybe point this to my website and use Gen AI to answer questions. I'm going to show you a sample of that today. Others of you may want to say, hey, I've got an external database sitting somewhere, as you can kind of see an example down here, an Oracle SQL database somewhere where I would like to point this at this Oracle SQL database and make that connection so that I can ask questions of that database. Okay. But this is kind of the first stage from a standpoint of this crawl, walk, run is defining where that knowledge base is going to be. The next step gets into the walk piece. So this is the logic. Okay. Would love to be able to just point something or point a bot at a series of documents, whatnot, websites, whatever knowledge sources, and just trust that it would do everything I need it to do, right? The reality is that's not sometimes the case. Sometimes you want to build logic into these bots so that you can ensure that people are getting information from perhaps the right data sources, and actually being able to control that process a little bit. So I'm going to show you as we're building out this bot today, what some of that logic actually looks like. And then the last one I call the run, and that's dealing with the actions is great. I've built my bot, but I want to leverage maybe one of the pre-built connectors that are out there today or a custom connector that I've done for any publicly available API to be able to run an action to go take an action somewhere. Right. I'm going to show you that today with just an Office a connector that we've got set up today. But I wanted to take an action and perform some sort of action based off of where they're at within the flow. So it's not really tied to the knowledge base necessarily. It's not even a logic. It's actually doing something externally within the application. And then I mentioned very quickly channels. Again, you can deploy this to a multitude of different types of channels of your choice. Again, we're not going to get into that today, but obviously that is something that you can consider as well. Cool. So I hate wasting this time on actual slides. So what I want to do is actually jump into the demonstration here. And I'm going to show you two things. One, I'm just going to show you real quickly that original walk or that original crawl concept, right? It's just pointing at a website. What does that look like? How does it work? So on and so forth. Okay. That's going to take just a minute or two to do. But then what I want to do is I want to actually get into a Copilot build scenario. And so this was a scenario that's come up recently. And after working through it, I thought it would be a good thing because I've done this before, and it's honestly, this scenario has taken me about 22 minutes to be able to build. And so when you start thinking to yourself, wow, I can do this in 22 minutes, that leverages all these different logic that's in here, all the different Gen AI components that are pieces, it becomes very powerful to be able to use these. And so the scenario is simple. An agency, we have tracked parking fees across multiple states and or counties. Okay, I'm going to use the states component, the states example today, but it can be states, counties, whatever. And these fees are currently sitting in disparate databases depending on what region they're in. The second piece of that is the agency spends a significant amount of time and resources taking inbound calls and searching through the appropriate databases to find these fees. Right. So imagine the time saving and just the man hours it takes to figure out who this person is, then go to the database, try to find that information and provide to them to take action. And what they're liking to do is offer like a self-service functionality to its citizens where they can use Gen AI to replace the manual lookup processes, which in turn frees up agency resources. And so that was the goal kind of behind the scenario here, is to build a Copilot bot which can essentially address this use case for the agency. So that's what we're going to do today. So let me go ahead and exit out of here. All right, and before we actually get into the build, I just want to level set a few things on this screen that you're seeing right now. This is Copilot Studio. Someone will ask the question in chat, and I'll just address it up front. Is this in GCC? Okay, I'm demoing today from a commercial environment. The reason I'm doing that is that there are a few small things that I'll showcase to you guys that are coming to GCC, but are not quite there yet. But I think it's important to see what's on the horizon. But the core generative AI capabilities that we're going to be using today are already in GCC. Okay, so that question will probably come up as well. So first, before we actually get into the build, I want to actually show you what I was referring to as that really slow crawl kind of a concept. And that's this California website bot I created. And so what I did is I simply took a Copilot and I built a Copilot bot, and I pointed it towards the California, again, being in California, the California.gov website, which is just our state's general website here. Right? And what I wanted to basically do is be able to say, hey, I want to point it at this website, and I want to be able to ask questions of the bot. Right? If I go to the website, rather than have to figure out what subfolder or what subpage I need to get to and how to go there, I would just like to provide a bot to be able to say, hey, ask your question here, and we'll get you to the right place. So let me just ask a few questions here. Who is the governor of California? Now, some of these seem simple, right? I get that. We probably all know who the governor of California is. Well, if you don't live in California, maybe you don't, but that's okay. And it simply takes me to a page and brings me back information around Gavin Newsom, who is our current governor. Okay. You'll also notice that there's a hyperlink here, which is sourcing it. And if I open that link, for example, you'll see that it takes me to the About page on my gov.ca website. Okay, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Okay. Well, what if we ask it a little more of a complex question? And the question I want to ask it is, how can I apply for a birth certificate? And if I could type right, this would be a lot easier. Okay. So now what it's doing, again, it's going to use the knowledge I've given it, the ca.gov website, to go out and find information for me that's pertinent to my question. And so now you can see you can apply for a birth certificate by contacting the Department of Public Health. They provide information, as well as it gives me a link. But let me click on that link. And you'll now see that it takes me to the page again on there, which says, hey, here's what you can do. And I can go directly into that website to be able to that process. Right. So rather than having to figure out and maybe search the site and go a few places that I don't need to go to, this is a very easy way of simply within about 2 minutes spinning up a bot, pointing it at a website, and go ahead and start activating it. So that's the crawl piece of this. So I wanted to showcase that to you guys before I got into kind of the build process that we're going to move here moving forward. All right, great. Okay, so now let's look at the use case that we were talking about. The use case, again, if you remember, it was a parking fees use case. And so what I want to do is I want to actually build this from scratch. Again, one of the features you're going to see start rolling out now is the ability to use natural language to start doing things in the Power Platform. This is also its Copilot Studio. I can come in here and I can start writing some sentences about what I would like it to do. For right now, I'm just going to skip this process because I want to get right into the configuration. But that's going to be a feature that you're going to be seeing come out here very soon. So I'm going to come here and say parking fee tracker bot. If I could type, things would be a lot quicker today. Okay. And I'm just going to quickly hit create. So now this takes about 30 seconds to set up the Copilot. Okay. So it takes a couple of seconds to get this going, all faster than I thought. And so now what we're doing is we're essentially getting our user interface of the things that we can do within the Copilot. Again, to kind of level set, you'll see that we have the ability to look at, provide description, give it instructions. Maybe we want it to answer in a certain way, add knowledge, which we're going to do, adjust topics, which we're going to do, and actually work through actions, which we're going to do as well. So all these three areas we're going to go through as part of our kind of crawl, walk, run mentality. Okay. The first thing I want to do here is I want to come up into my settings though real quick, and I just want to ensure that my generative AI is turned on, right? I'm going to save that. Why is that important? Because we want to make sure we're leveraging that moving forward as we start building out and asking questions of the actual bot there as well. All right, so now let's get into it. So as part of building this bot here, there's a number of different topics that you can utilize, okay? When someone just brings up the bot, it's this conversation start topic that's on here, which basically says, hey, what do you want to start doing, okay? I can build my own topic if I wish to kind of start this. I'm just going to leverage the conversation topic and build off of it, kind of moving forward, okay? So how do I do that? Well, let's open it up and let's start building. The first thing I do is I want to change the introduction here. I don't really want, I'm going to remove a few things here, and I want to say, let's get to finding those parking fees. Okay, so just a quick little introduction of what I want to be able to do here. Okay. The first thing as part of this process is I want to ask it a question. And we're going to be asking a couple of questions as we go through here because we're trying to take people using some of the logic that's in here and trying to take people down the correct path of what they're looking for. Okay. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to simply ask my initial question. And I'm going to say, do you have a specific ID number? Okay. And it's going to be a multiple choice question. So they're either going to give me a yes answer or they're going to give me a no answer. No. You'll also notice that this answer comes through as a variable. So if any of you have used variables in the past year, it's always good from a best practice standpoint just to kind of name these variables because we're going to be using these later in the process. So it's good to be able to name these what you would wish. I'll also point out too that as you're using these variables, it's important to understand that we need to make these global variables here in order to use them in a subsequent step in this process. So for each one of these variables I build through here, you're going to see me take this step of naming the variable and then actually setting it up as a global. And you'll see that by doing that, it's now giving me two different questions. It's a yes or a no. Okay. Now let's kind of branch off a little. If it's a yes, what's the next obvious question we want to ask? Well, we want to ask, what is that ID? What is that ID? ID number. Okay. And rather than being a multiple choice option, I actually want to make it an entire response. So I just want them to be able to give me that response. And I'm going to change my variable here to ID so I can reference that as I move forward. So I've changed my ID to there and set it as a global variable. So that's step one. The next step in this process has to do with generative AI. So I want to come back to that in a minute because I want to do all the generative AI pieces here together. Okay. So let's continue to build logic into this bot a little bit. If they say no, right, there may be some questions we need to ask. And I've got a series of a couple of questions that are in here. I'm going to ask my first question, which is, what is your first name? Multiple choice. It's not multiple choice. It's actually an entire response. And I'm going to set my variable up to be first because I'm going to want to use this later. Global. Great. My second question, as you guys probably are guessing at this point, is I'm going to, what is your last name? And the reason these are important is we're going to use these variables that we're capturing as built into the Gen AI requests we're going to make moving forward. So if somebody gives me their actual name, we want to know what their first name is, what their last name is, and then the last thing that we're going to pull here is the date of birth. Global, and then the last one we'll make is the date of birth. What is your date of birth? Or I guess I could just say birthday if I wasn't being so formal, but that's okay. And then again, not an option set here, but instead in this case, it's going to be a date field. So I'm going to make this a date field and set this variable as DOB. All right. So I've asked them if they didn't give me an ID, what their first name is, what their last name is, and what their date of birth is. What I also want to do is do a little bit of verification because this bot is not intended to authenticate anybody up front. Maybe this is just public knowledge that is out there for whatever the use cases that you have. But I want to verify that I've got the right person. They've entered the right piece of information. So I'm going to go through this process and actually ask them one final question here. And this final question is going to be ask a question. It's going to be, is the below information correct? Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to verify their name and their DOB. Now, the way I'm going to do that as part of this is, again, using the variables that I've just created a moment ago to be able to pull that information in. So by doing so, I can come up to this little insert variable option. And I can say, hey, here's the variables I've just created, first, last, etc. I'm going to go first name, space. Let's do another one. And I'm going to insert last name. And then down under DOB, I'm going to insert DOB. And I can do some, formatting here. Let's go ahead and make these bulleted or bold and italicized so they're sticking out, right? The headers. And then I've got multiple choice options. What are my two options? Okay. So my options here are going to be, yes, that's me. Or the option is going to be, who is that? Right? Because maybe it's not me, right? And then again, to kind of follow the process, I'm going to set my variable. I'm just going to call this verification. And I'll set that as a global piece. Okay, so you can start to see that as I'm working through this project, I'm actually building out logic to take them down a specific path. And that's important because where we're going to go next is going to kind of showcase why we're doing this. Okay. Let's go ahead and save this real quick. And before we do that and move forward in the process, I want to come back to the knowledge because we talked a little bit about the knowledge base, adding the knowledge sources. Great. We're asking them these questions. Where is this data coming from? So if I come back to the knowledge here at any point, I can come in and I can add a number of different knowledge sources. Again, I remember the really fast crawls and probably getting into more walk runs is when you're doing some of the more kind of the back end, the Oracle SQL or SQL database, a ServiceNow catalog, other things that you can connect to. But for the sake of today, I've got a couple of files I'm going to use as my background databases, if you will, right? And so I'm just going to upload those into my bot here. So I'm going to go to my page here, to my downloads, and here's my California fees and my Washington fees. Those are the two databases that I'm going to use. And you'll see now that we brought those into the system. So all the questions that we're asking, the directions we're taking people down are all going to be based on these two documents. So we'll give that a second to process. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through, it's going to start indexing this information. You'll see that it's in progress. This will take a few minutes to process through, but these are going to be the two items that we're going to capture. The last thing I'll mention here from a knowledge perspective before we go back into finishing the build is we do have a feature now in here that says allow the AI to use its own general knowledge. I'm going to turn that off. The reason I'm going to do that, and you're going to say, well, Joe, if you're not using AI, how are you able to actually use Gen AI to go search this stuff? This actual feature says that, hey, if you can't find what you're looking for in the knowledge sources I've given you, go out and try to find it your own. I don't want that to happen. I want this to be self-contained to the documents that I have. And oftentimes I think that will be the case for a lot of agencies and organizations. So you have the ability, if you would like to expand your search out, you can, but I'm going to disable that for the time being. Okay? So I've built those knowledge bases in. Great. Let's go back to my topic now. The reason I added those at this point, it's important because as I'm continuing to build out this bot and build out the paths I'm going to go in, the next kind of logic that we're going to build in, again, kind of in tying to the walk mentality, has to do with these two states, right? So we built this out. If no, we're asking questions about who they are. We're verifying this information, right? And we're basically saying, hey, if it's yes, then I need to take a certain action. If it's no, let's go ahead and add in if it's no. If it's no, this is easy. I do this all the time. I go ahead and put in, no, I spell my name wrong, or I put my kid's date of birth instead of my own into something, right? In this case, I simply want them to go back to a previous step. If they entered something wrong, it's not them, okay? I want them to go back and start this process over again. So when we get to that point in the process, it says, hey, you know what? Is this you? No, that's not. Who is that? It's simply going to take them back to the first question, allow me to re-enter it. If it is me, and this is my last bit of logic I'm going to put in here, but I think it's a really cool part of the capabilities here. I'm going to ask one final question, and you're probably like, geez, Joe, how many questions? Why do we need these? I'm going to ask, what state are you located in? And I'm going to give them 3 options. I'm going to say California, because as you know, that data set that we just added is in California. I'm going to give them Washington as an option, even if I can't spell it right. Oh my goodness. And then lastly, I'm going to give them a 3rd option. And that 3rd option is I'm not in either of those states. The reason we're doing that is there may be scenarios where you've got data for 2 data sources like California and Washington, but not for anywhere else. And so that may actually need to be an actual conversation or some sort of manual follow-up as part of that process. So in this case, if I'm in Nevada and I'm making this and I click on this, it's going to take and trigger an action. If you remember us talking about actions, which is going to take me a completely different direction down this. And so I'm going to save this now as my last variable.
Hey, Joe, while you're finishing that up, I want to point out a couple things and maybe expand beyond the context of your specific example, and put it in the context of some others, because I think folks are understandably kind of getting hung up. I think the intent here, where we're building towards, is we started with the crawl, right? And one of the most powerful things about Copilot Studio is your ability to use these large language models to respond to questions by rendering over a knowledge source that you control, right? So instead of folks just going out to ChatGPT or using the Bing chatbot or whatever, right? Like now we're directing users of these copilots to a chatbot where we are in control of the information and largely in control of what type of response users are going to get, right? So we don't want to overlook just kind of like the general knowledge base and the general AI capabilities of Copilot. What Joe has transitioned into here is now where we're crawling, or no, we're walking now, aren't we, Joe?
We're walking.
I think we're walking, right? And we're building towards this scenario where it's not necessarily a one size fits all in terms of we're going to use this knowledge base to answer all of the questions that come in, right? Like we might have this, I'm a fan of this like front door concept where we have a Copilot, maybe it sits on our public facing webpage and it can answer questions based, general inquiries based on the information on our webpage. But maybe folks have questions about what kind of benefits they might be eligible for, right? Now we're going to take them down a specialized path where we're going to have kind of a specialized, specially configured knowledge source. Maybe we even use our own custom AI model that we've built in the Azure AI Studio. Like, I don't know, right? But for certain types of questions, we're going to take them down a different path where we're still using generative AI, but this generative AI is unique based on how it's been instructed to respond to inquiries and the knowledge base that it's using to respond to those inquiries. So like this is just this is a modest example, but I just want to take a step back and kind of like highlight the general principles that we're using this example to illustrate, and get folks out of this specific example necessarily and just thinking more broadly about the patterns and the techniques that we're using in other instances in which you might find yourself wanting or needing to use similar techniques. Is that fair, Joe? I kind of highlight
Yeah, no,
that.
that's a great point. I love the front door analogy. I think that's really great, because I think, as I mentioned earlier, it'd be great if we just could have a source and just open it up and let people ask. But if we want to maintain some control over this, as we do in this case, right, this allows us to really limit and have almost 100% control over what people are searching and what they're finding.
Right.
100%.
So we're using a relatively simple example here, but it's more important than the example is this concept of it's not just about generative AI rendering over knowledge sources. I mean, that much is huge and very transformational. But if we take one step beyond that, which is where we're walking here, and it's also about the orchestration, right? And making sure that we're referencing the appropriate knowledge source based on the nature of the question. So anyways, thank you, Joe.
Absolutely.
Sorry
Well,
to
and that's a
interrupt
good segue because now we're actually going to jump into the Gen AI piece. So we built the framework for all these doors we want them to walk through, but now we want to leverage that Gen AI to be able to answer some of those questions. So if you remember back to original kind of scenarios, do you have an ID that you can leverage? Yes, we do. Okay, great. If they have that ID, we're going to ask them for it. The next step we want to take in this process is we want to leverage this concept of generative answers. Right? So if I click on generative answers here, it's going to bring up my generative answers icon here. And what I can do, and this is kind of where it gets a little bit into kind of the low code world, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the input and I need to define for this question. I need to define the question that I want generative answers to use, right? And I've already kind of typed some of these out, but let me go ahead and just put this in. I'll expand this screen so you can kind of see what it is. So I'm going to open quote. I need the first and last name, date of birth, ID number, and amount for, right, close quote. And then what I want it to do is I want it to go find that global variable that was just entered for me for ID. Right? And then I'll open quote, period, close quote, right? So I'm putting, writing a little bit of a PowerFX language here just to say, hey, this is the question I want the generative AI to ask. I need the first name, last name, date of birth, ID, and amount for this particular ID, and I can insert that. The other thing that's important to make sure we put in here is those data sources. So those data sources we added just a moment ago, by clicking on that, you'll see over here on the right-hand side, those data sources appear. And so I have the ability to come in here and say, yes, I want to ask a generative answer question using this language of this global ID number based off of these data sources. Okay, pretty straightforward. We're also doing something similar further down the process. When they get down to the point where they're saying whether they're in California, Washington, or I'm not in either of these states, right? You'll recognize and remember we have two different databases in this case. Okay? I want to perform generative AI features in both of these spots as well. So I can come in here and for the California, I can come in, do the same process, create a generative AI answer. Now I did type this one because it's a little bit longer. So I'm just going to copy and paste this piece into here just for the sake of time today. Formula, there we go. And so you'll see now what I've done is I said, please provide a list of all fees from the knowledge sources for first and last name with a date of birth of the global ID. Please include a list of all individual fees, so on and so forth. So now I'm asking for a list of information and I can insert that piece as well. Now here's where the difference comes in. When I go to data sources here and select this, again, the person selected California. So I don't need the bot to go search through Washington. I only need them and want them to search through the California fees in here. Okay? So I can do that by simply selecting only the sources and picking California. Okay? I'm going to do the exact same thing with Washington. I'm going to come in. I'm going to go to my generative answers. I'm going to use the same formula, right? That's asking the exact same question. Only now this time, instead of using the California data source, I'm going to use the Washington data source. So you can kind of see how, as Doug mentioned earlier, you start to have control over what sources you may be wanting to leverage as the back end for people asking these questions. Okay. So that's the walk, right? That's kind of the walk piece. The last piece is the run. Okay. And I'm going to show you this here real quickly, and then I'm going to open up the bot and show you how it works. Okay. The last piece is the run. I mentioned earlier that this is a scenario where, I may not be in either of those states. There isn't a database to go look for. This is an action that needs someone to go take an action, something manually to go try and help the individual who's out there. Okay. So I'm going to come in here and I'm actually going to call an action. And again, this is kind of that run piece from the system. I can call an action based off of any number of different connectors that are in the system, whether they're pre-built connectors, whether they're custom connectors you have. You can kind of start to see this information that's in here. But what I want to do is I want to leverage an Office connector right now that's going to actually allow me to send an email as part of this answer. So if somebody gets to the end of this point where they're not in California or Washington, I actually want it to trigger an action in Office that will allow the bot to automatically send out a notification in regards to this inquiry. Okay. It's simply verifying my permissions, and I'll go ahead and submit this. And now this will take a second to set up, but then what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to define what I want that email to be, right? And I'm going to use, again, those variables that we've been building throughout the process, throughout the interaction with our friend here that we're talking to, in getting to be able to develop that particular email. So it's saving the topic here momentarily. Right, this does take about 10 seconds to do. There we go. And now we can go in and start to filling out information about this. So things like, who is it going to? Well, I'm just going to use my own account here, guys. This is my admin account in here. So I want it to be sent to, in this scenario, I want it to be set to the individual who's responsible for this process. And I'm going to call it failed fee inquiry, right? Someone needs to take an action on it. Again, if I could type right, that'd be great. And then I want to bring in the body of the email. Again, I've already pre-typed some of this, so I'm going to copy and paste into here what I would like. And what I want the actual email to say is I want it to, an inquiry has been associated with this person, first name, last name. I need it actually to pull an email here. Oh, you'll notice here that I actually forgot to put that variable in. So I'm actually just going to remove that at this point for the sake of time today. But I could add that email variable as a question that needs to happen. Okay. But this is going to trigger that email out to an individual as part of that process. And then I'll just set this as DOB, it don't matter. So basically what we've done is we've set a point now where we've gotten to California, Washington, or I'm not in either of those states. In two of those scenarios, it'll run a question on Gen AI, and another it'll actually trigger an action. Okay. So let's go ahead and test that out and kind of see what happens here. We got a little topic here with an error. Hold on. Let me do my pod topic checker. Oh, I might have the wrong connector on. Hold on one moment. Okay, insert. Oh, and we'll just do first. That's fine. All right. Okay. So let's go ahead and just run this test. So on the right-hand side here, we can open this up and kind of see how this whole process works. Okay. Now let's reset this. So now when I reset the Copilot, when someone opens this up, here's what they're going to see. They're going to say, hey, do you have a specific ID? Let's do the first process. I'm going to say yes. Okay. What is that ID? And you can see that I've mistyped that as normal. It's just ID number 100. And now what it's doing is it's going to go look at the data set, both of those items that I gave it, and it's going to return to me what I asked it for, the name, the date of birth, the ID number, and the amount. Okay. Now, normally I'd put an end conversation at that point. I didn't do some of those steps here, so it kind of triggered, but I'm going to reset it and head down a different path. So let's ask it a different question. No, we don't have an ID now. It's going to, instead of that, it's going to ask me for my first name. I'm going to say Joe Smith. What's your date of birth? 2/1/1990. Okay. Is the below information correct, Joe? No, it's not. Who is that? I don't know who that person is. I'm going to go back up. It's going to take me back to the first question. John Smith, 2/1/1990. Something's wrong with my variable in there. Let me go actually check it real quick. Verifying this. Oh, you know what? It did not save my first name, last name. So let me just drop those variables in there real quickly. This will take me 1 minute. So again, my global first. Insert my global first name. Insert my global last name. And again, we want to make sure we're capturing these for reasons of searches, right? And my DOB. All right, and let's just go ahead and save this real quickly and make sure that this is running accurately. There we go. Okay, so let's do this one more time. All right, no, I don't have an ID. Again, we'll go John Smith, because I know the data set that's in here, 2/1/1990. It's asking me to validate who that is. Again, if it isn't me and I've entered something wrong, legally I go by William, or legally I'm William, but I go by Joe. And so sometimes I'll enter the wrong name here, so I'll have to go back and do that type of a thing. I can say, yes, that's me. Then it asks me, where am I at? Are you located in California or Washington? And I'll just select Washington. And so now it returns the following. He has two fees, fee 100 with an amount of $500 and 101 with an amount of $1,500. And then it gives me a total at the end of that as well. So that's where now we're kind of taking them down the path. We're leveraging the Gen AI feature to be able to go pull that information from those files to be able to render that back. Okay? And I'll show you one last thing here, because this is dealing with the actual action that's on the back end, the Outlook action. So if I say no, and I say Nancy James, I'll just use somebody else, Nancy James. Okay. 1/1/1980. Great. Is it correct? Yes, that's me. And then the last step is I'm not in either of those states. Okay. Oh, let me connect that real quickly. Sorry. Oh, I haven't connected my actual Office connector yet. Let me do that real quickly. Oh. Awesome. Okay, cool. Now it is connected. All right. So now we'll do that one last time, guys. And this will be the last thing we have. Any idea? Do you have no idea? No, Nancy. It really doesn't matter who we put in here right now. Nancy James, 1/1/1980 again. Again, is it correct? Yes, it is. I'm not in either of those states. And now what that's going to do is you'll notice that we can put in a notification page here. We can give information about what's happened to that piece here. But if you notice in my toolbar here at the top, this is my email inbox in the background. And I just got a failed inquiry fee that says there is a fee inquiry falls outside of the states of California, Washington for Nancy James, DOB 1/1/1980. And if I did ask her for her email, I could put her email in there as well. So again, that's kind of getting in towards the run conversation is, okay, I've built a bot. I can do a lot of this, the logic and kind of shooting people down the right paths, use some Gen AI features to be able to provide content. But if there is something that falls outside of that string, or I need to reach outside to either take an action or do something, I can do so using these connectors. In this case, it actually presented the email. So that's kind of the walkthrough. Again, that take about 30 minutes to set up. Again, a little more explaining. When I did it yesterday, I did it in 19 minutes when I didn't have to explain things. But it gives you a real easy way to understand kind of how we start to leverage these Gen AI capabilities and build out kind of some of this functionality in Copilot Studio. So at this point, Deb, I can turn this back over to you, or if Doug, anything you wanted to add on the concepts here that we're seeing. I think that's what we had to showcase for today.
Very good. Thank you so much, Joe. I'm going to stop the recording.